Hi all. Today we're going to talk about the Cloud Apps Style Guide. So in order to allow Cloud Apps to look similar for users across the different Cloud Apps, we've developed a style guide that gives guidance to Cloud App developers for how they can build their app. So today we're going to take a look at the style guide and then take a look at one of the tutorials that shows how to implement many aspects of the style guide. So let's hop over here into our browser, and like all things Cloud Apps related, we're going to start at the developer network. We're going to click on Cloud Apps at the top, and then click on Documentation, and then finally on the Style Guide. So here's where the Style Guide is located. And the Style Guide lists all sorts of aspects of designing Cloud Apps, and the colors, and typography, and the buttons. And many of these things are provided out of the box by the Cloud App framework. So for many of these things, like the typography and the colors, there's no need to do something in particular when you're developing a Cloud App. So today we'll take a look at some of the aspects where it actually requires the developer to make some changes or to consider the style guide when they're building their app. So this is the style guide that we're going to be referring to. And the example that we're going to use is from the Cloud Apps tutorial app. So if you're not aware, there's actually a tutorial app which we built in order to demonstrate some of the features of Cloud Apps and how to use them when you're developing your Cloud Apps. Some code there that you can copy and paste. And so here I'm in my Alma instance, and I'm going to click on the Cloud App Center. I'm going to hop over to Available Apps, and I'm going to go to the Cloud App tutorials. And I'm also going to click on the GitHub link because I'll want to download the code in a minute. And then back over here in Alma, I will click on the Install button and then open up the Tutorials app. So again, this Tutorials app is definitely worth taking a look at. It has a lot of demonstrations in it. Within the developer network where we just were, there is a whole section which talks about all of the different tutorials. This is here in the tutorial section within Cloud Apps. So for each tutorial, there's an entire explanation in the developer network. Definitely worth taking a look at. And we're going to focus in particular on the following the style guide demo. So let's click on that. And in order for us to see what was done behind the scenes, let's actually go ahead and grab this Cloud App Tutorials code. So just like all Cloud Apps, this code is available on GitHub. And so I'm going to come into the code icon. I'm going to click on this to copy it. And I'll hop over to my terminal, and I'll do a git clone on that URL that I just copied. That's going to bring the code down to me. And then I'll hop into that directory, and I'll just do, I'm going to open that up with Microsoft Visual Code. So here is the code for the Cloud App tutorial app that I've just grabbed from GitHub. And let's go ahead and just open up the Cloud App folder and then source an app and find the style component. Here it is. Great. So now we have this style component. We can take a look at the HTML and see what was done in order to make this happen. So we're going to flip back and forth now between the Cloud App tutorial and the code behind the scenes. So going back over to the tutorial. So it tells us that it's referenced this Cloud App Style Guide, which we showed before. And we're showing an example here of many different aspects of the Cloud App Style Guide. So I'll point out first of all that you see that buttons and button colors are handled out of the box for us by the framework. And so we see automatically this button color has referenced the color of my Alma theme, so that we get that automatically. And also all of these fonts and the colors and the sizing, all of that is handled for us by the included CSS, so I don't have to do anything here. So let's first of all take a look at the layout. We see that as a part of the layout, these buttons are up here on the upper right-hand side. And the main button is primary color, and the secondary button is secondary color. And that we see from the style guide. On the layout section, it tells us that the button should be in the upper right. And we see here that there's actually a special class called Ex Libris Cloud App Actions, and that will take care of putting the buttons in the right places for us. And if we look back here at the buttons, so buttons, it says they should be flat buttons, and the color should be primary or secondary. And indeed, if we look at our code here, we'll see that there are buttons here. This button is a flat button, and the color is primary. Now, it happens to be that in the Cloud App tutorials, so some of the aspects of that top menu is handled for us by this top menu partial component here. So here's where the class is. Of course, if you're building your own app and you don't need to have that menuing up there, you can just put that class directly on your div. So here we see the ECA Actions class. We have our secondary button sending us home, and then we have the buttons which come from our particular component, and there's that button. So we have flat button with the color in the ECA Actions area or class, and that's what puts them here in the upper right hand corner. So that's the first thing. So now we've looked at layout, we've looked at colors that we get automatically by specifying primary, and the typography we get automatically. And we have the buttons handled in the upper right hand corner by the ECA button class. So those are aspects there that we've already discussed of the style guide. And there are additional aspects of the style guide. Let's go take a look. So colors we've talked about, buttons we've talked about, form elements we're not going to cover here. Most of it is handled out of the box for us. We're using the material buttons, the material form elements, and so all those are handled by your standard Angular material library. Typography we said is handled by the CSS out of the box. And now we can get into a few of the more advanced style recommendations that we have. Okay, so first of all, for icons, we provide icons that use the ProQuest user experience framework. So the list of icons is available here in this link, and here it shows you how to add those icons. And then we also show that when icons are used as buttons in a list, then they can follow this rule, these rules here, that they appear on the right-hand side, they appear and they don't appear. So all this can be handled for us by the included CSS if we follow this guidance here. So actually, let's take a look at that in this example. So we see here that there is a list. Okay, this is an icon which is used as a button. So the button only appears when I hover over, and the outline of the button only appears when I hover over the button itself. And the functionality of this sample is that I'm using the buttons to remove these items from the list. And then we see an empty list and another icon being used, and we'll take a look at how that works in a moment. So if we see back here in our code, we see that there's a list. We see we have a UXF icon class for each one, and because I am using these classes, then the included CSS handles all that styling for me. Let's hop back over. That's how icons work and icon buttons work. Now for dialogues, we recommend using the material dialog component. Okay, and there's some recommendations here. For example, we recommend that there won't be a default option, that they both be gray, that the yes is on the right and the no is on the left, that we specify with words what we're looking for. So we have an example here in the style guide, and also, of course, an example here on our style guide tutorial. So now that I have an empty list, I'm going to click the Reset List button, and it says, are you sure you want to reset the list? And I say, yes, I do. And it goes and resets the list. Okay, so we can see that code is here in the confirmation dialog HTML within my style component. So we have that as an example as well. Okay, moving along. We have alerts. So alerts can be handled by an alert service, which again is provided by the framework itself. So there's a link to some documentation here, and we'll just see how that looks in our app. So we see that when I reset and I say yes, I get a success message, list successfully reset, and that disappears. So for alerts, we have warnings and errors and success messages, and those are all handled for us by the Cloud App Framework. And in my code, all I have to do is inject the alert service and then call the alert service when it's done. For example, success, the list successfully reset. Okay, so that is an example of how to use the alert service. Let's hop back over. An empty list we already saw. If there is an empty list, we recommend using this icon. And so we have that example here, as we recall. That as an example of an empty list. And again, referring to our code that is here in the HTML under empty list. So here is that example there. So something you can just copy and paste directly out of the tutorial or out of the style guide itself. Okay, footer we won't cover because that's not something that's used very often, but we do show here how to add a footer if you want to. Footer is for persistent navigation, for example, changing languages. We spoke about layout earlier with the ECA actions. And the final thing I want to mention is a loading spinner. So that, again, we have built-in support for that within the style guide. And if we go here back to our app, we'll see that when I reset and I say yes, we have a spinner. And the way that's handled in my code is that I have a spinner div with a class called loading shade, and it's dependent on a class variable called loading. And then within my app, I set loading to false. But then whenever I do an activity, for example here, I say loading is true, and then when I'm finished, I say loading is false. And so that controls whether or not that loading shade is shown or not. And here is again some code that you can copy and paste. So we've covered the Cloud App Style Guide. We showed how to use the tutorials in order to see some examples of implementing those styles. Many of the styles are provided for us out of the box just by using the Cloud App Framework. And here during this video, we put an emphasis on the aspects that a developer needs to take into consideration when building their app. And so things like layout and where to put your buttons and special class names. So all those things we talked about during this video. Of course, all of the code we reference is in the Cloud App Tutorial GitHub repository and also here in the Developer Network under the Cloud App Style Guide. Hope this has been helpful. Thanks all.